There's no American city quite like New Orleans, and this was equally true in the Antebellum period, as historian Steve Luxenberg writes. A New York journalist, after 2 visits in 1853, was left reeling. How could he explain to his northern readers that New Orleans was not a white-black society, but French, Spanish, African, Celtic, with nearly all possible mixed varieties of these? Fascinated, he put together a list with the various grades of the colored people, 9 in total, as designated by the French according to the greater or less prominence of Negro blood. That journalist was none other than friend of the channel Frederick Law Olmsted, an excerpt from whose book, The Cotton Kingdom, highlights his fascination with the Crescent City's light-skinned black women. There is one among the multitudinous classifications of society in New Orleans, which is a very peculiar and characteristic result of the prejudices, vices, and customs of the various elements of color, class, and nation, which have been there brought together. I refer to a class composed of the illegitimate offspring of white men and colored women, mulattoes or quadroons, who, from habits of early life, the advantages of education, and the use of wealth, are too much superior to the Negroes in general to associate with them, and are not allowed by law or the popular prejudice to marry white people. The girls are frequently sent to Paris to be educated and are very accomplished. They are generally pretty, often handsome. I have rarely, if ever, met more beautiful women than 1 or 2 whom I saw by chance in the streets. They are better formed and have a more graceful and elegant carriage than Americans in general, while they seem to have commonly inherited or acquired much of the taste and skill in the selection and arrangement and the way of wearing dresses and ornaments that is the especial distinction of the women of Paris. Their beauty and attractiveness being their fortune, they cultivate and cherish with diligence every charm or accomplishment they are possessed of. Of course, men are attracted by them, associate with them, are captivated, and become attached to them, and, not being able to marry them legally and with the usual forms and securities for constancy, make such arrangements as can be agreed upon. When a man makes a declaration of love to a girl of this class, she will admit or deny, as the case may be, her happiness in receiving it, but supposing she is favorably disposed, she will usually refer the applicant to her mother. The mother inquires into the circumstances of the suitor, ascertains whether he is able to maintain a family, and, if satisfied with him in these and other respects, requires from him security that he will support her daughter in a style suitable to the habits in which she has been bred, and that, if he should ever leave her, he will give her a certain sum for her future support, and a certain additional sum for each of the children she shall then have. The wealth thus secured will, of course, vary, as in society with higher assumptions of morality, with the value of the lady in the market, that is, with her attractiveness and the number and value of other suitors she may have or may reasonably expect. Of course, I do not mean that love has nothing at all to do with it, but love is sedulously restrained and held firmly in hand until the road of competency is seen to be clear, with less humbug than our English custom requires about it. Everything being satisfactorily arranged, a tenement in a certain quarter of the town is usually taken, and the couple move into it and go to housekeeping, living as if they were married. The woman is not, of course, to be wholly deprived of the society of others. Her former acquaintances are continued, and she sustains her relations as a daughter, sister, and friend. Of course, too, her husband, she calls him so, will be likely to continue also more or less in and form a part of this kind of society. There are parties and balls, holes, masques, and all the movements and customs of other fashionable society which they can enjoy in it if they wish. The women of this sort are represented to be exceedingly affectionate in disposition and constant beyond reproach. During all the time a man sustains this relation, he will commonly be moving also in reputable society on the other side of the town. Not improbably, eventually he marries and has a family establishment elsewhere. Before doing this, he may separate from his plaçage, so she is termed. If so, he pays her according to agreement, and as much more perhaps as his affection for her or his sense of the cruelty of the proceeding may lead him to, and she has the world before her again in the position of a widow. Many men continue for a long time to support both establishments, particularly if their legal marriage is one de convenance. But many others form so strong attachments that the relation is never discontinued, but becomes indeed that of marriage, except that it is not legalized or solemnized. These men leave their estate at death to their children, to whom they may have previously given every advantage of education they could command. What becomes of the boys, I am not informed. The girls sometimes are removed to other countries where their color does not prevent their living reputable lives, but, of course, mainly continue in the same society and are fated to a life similar to that of their mothers. I have described this custom as it was described to me. I need hardly say in only its best aspects. The crime and heartbreaking sorrow that must frequently result from it must be evident to every reflective reader. Luxembourg explains that of the many threads woven into New Orleans' sinuous history, French colony, Spanish domination, Caribbean refuge, American territory, and, since 1812, 18th U.S. state, the strands featuring the free people of color were among the few that stretched back to the beginning, to the 1720s and 1730s, when Bienville and his pioneer band from France were coaxing a settlement out of swamp with the involuntary sweat of enslaved men from Africa. For more than a century, under the governments of 3 different nations, free people of color had occupied a tenuous middle ground between liberty and captivity. Granted some rights and deprived of many others, they formed the sandwiched layer of a 3-tiered society. They could own property, make contracts, obtain licenses, bring lawsuits, and testify in court. But in 1860, they still could not vote. They could not hold public office or sit on a jury. They could not send their children to public schools, which had been educating white students for nearly 20 years now, and when they went to the St. Charles Theater or the Gaiety, they had a choice of the colored galley, 25 cents, or the plusher quadroon boxes, 75 cents, a favored spot of the elite among les gens de couleur libre, as the French people of color were known in the city's French-speaking neighborhoods. They were free, but fenced in. Luxembourg's book details how Homer Plessy, a free Louisiana Creole of color born 5 to 10 years after Olmsted's visit, was chosen as the plaintiff in the Plessy v. Ferguson case of the 1890s because he could pass for white. Sadly, the gambit failed, and the Supreme Court's 1896 ruling entrenched the separate but equal doctrine that prevailed for more than a half-century. As always, your comments are welcome, and I'd be especially interested to hear from New Orleans residents on what they know about this part of their history. And help this little channel keep growing by subscribing if you haven't already, hitting that like button, and sharing with anyone who might be interested. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next episode.